So I should probably explain this before we go too far. I'm not a YouTuber. I don't know what I'm doing with any of this equipment. I'm planning a paddle, a sea kayak from Clairview to Mackay, about 320 kilometres through the Northland Islands. And I figured I'd give it a go at documenting it. And I've kind of done that before, but in a very basic, crappy way. It just seems like the sort of thing I guess people do these days. Maybe someone will enjoy it more than my other videos. This is the route. 8 days of actual paddling is the plan here. Starting at Clairview. If anyone's ever driven the Bruce Highway from Brisbane to Cairns on that central bit, there's one point you drive just by the ocean, really the only part I think between Brisbane and Cairns, well, and Cardwell. Quite dry, little huts along there, nice area. And then planning to paddle out a fair way and all the way back into Mackay eventually. Along the ways, lots of little remote islands, a couple of variations of the trip. As you can see, Percy Island, which I plan to spend a couple of days at, which looks very interesting, a very popular spot for yachties. And from Percy Island I do a little hop up to this Pine Peak Island and then a fairly committed crossing at I think nearly 70 kilometres to Penrith Island. You'll see these are actually my GPS routes that I'll upload to the GPS devices. I'll put a little bumper bar on these longer crossings. I'll show you in a sec, but there's a fair bit of current going along here, and what it enables me to do is just understand quickly by looking at my GPS device how far I'm drifting relative to my path. Now I'll calculate a sort of S-bend with the currents before I go as to where I should be. But again, if I should be 3 kilometres to the southwest at a particular point in time, I can quickly see by looking at myself in the chart that's roughly where I am. If I'm out here, I know I'm more like 5 kilometres and my calculations and the drift's a little bit off and I've got to correct that. I've done plenty of long crossings before. This isn't really about testing my limits, not that I'm not a bit nervous about some of it, or discovering what I'm capable of, but I want to get out there and see these places. My hoped for ultimate destination is this little spot, Bushy Island. It's a K right out on the reef. Can't stay there, so it's a day trip, about 40 kilometres, 20 kilometres each way from Penrith Island. Looks really cool, really interesting. Not the sort of feature that you'd often get to paddle to too easily in this part of the world. So if I can't get there, because I do want a bit of a easier, in terms of calmer day I expect, given the committing nature out there from Penrith, but I think there's a fair chance we'll get lucky. Then coming back through Schoolfell and into Mackay. Tides are fairly significant in this part of the world. We're easily getting 5 metre tides with the associated currents. There's a cool little app here or program which helps model it, and you can see where I'm launching. Hopefully you see the mouse there is coming out of Clairview and heading out. And that first day, even into the second day, out into Percy Island there, sorry. It's Percy Island, so out through here. There's some really, really strong currents. If I just sort of go through, they change with the tides. Yeah, look at that. So this entire area gets currents that certainly are strong enough that if I was to be going against them, I'd be doing well to make a very, very slow gain at full pace. So definitely planning to ride those where possible. The trick is really to get out of bed whenever you need to be and launch if you're going with the tide on the top of the tide, so it takes you with you, and really get all the paddling done in that outgoing tide, or vice versa for the other way. When I get further out between these islands, it's more going to be one that'll drop a little bit, but also it's sort of the currents from the beam. So that's where it'll impact me, flushing me one way and then the other way as I'm trying to make my straight crossing. Just a matter of calculation there. The other one is some of the features. I've planned out a few of these here. Lots of shoaly country according to these maps where the tides will rip through, create some interesting waves and the like. So that's all right. It's just you deal with it as best you can. Try not to hit it in the worst conditions, and where you can paddle around or set your route. But I think I was originally planning to head out more directly, and there was a lot more shoals to deal with in the first and second day. Now I'll go a little bit further north, and that should minimise a lot of that country. Not totally remove it, but minimise it. Alright, not going to do the endless gear rundown here, tediously bit by bit by bit. This isn't my thing. I'm not a YouTuber, but I do have some interesting stuff that's maybe a little bit different to what people would normally consider taking for a trip like this. This is going to be a week, 2 weeks, fairly remote. There's one good reasonable resupply by my standards at Percy Island. Percy Island's going to have water supply. Thankfully, very kindly, the caretakers there have agreed to help me with that. Maybe a little bit of food, maybe pinch something good off the yachties who stop there. But other than that, it's completely self-supported. No water in any of the islands, which is an issue. We'll talk about that later. I have to take all my food, obviously. Thankfully, a sea kayak, for those who've never sea kayaked, you can carry a lot of gear, and it does influence you a little bit, but the weight's not a huge concern. So if you're used to bushwalking, hiking, backpacking in the States, then you can probably get a good 2 to 3 solid backpacks worth of gear in a kayak if you really try. A few little comfort items as well. Big, clunky, trolley for the kayak, and this does pull down to a degree, but it is pretty big and heavy, but I wouldn't be without on a trip like this. There's some big tides and potentially big distances to take your kayak to and from the water, depending on when you launch. Even without that, carrying all your gear separately in bags over 100 metres or 2 can add a lot to the end of the day, and it is actually very important on a trip like this to make your camp life as simple and relaxing and enabling of recovery as you can. So the trolley comes with me. It pulls apart, bits go on the deck, a few in the hatches, so I strap these wheels actually on top of the back deck, and that means I can just get out at wherever I am, put this under the kayak, set it up, and roll the whole thing up to camp. Then in the morning when I need to launch, I can take down camp, pack everything in the kayak other than this, roll it down to the water's edge, take the trolley off and go. So adds a lot of efficiency and makes things a lot more comfortable. Both taking a tent and my hammock. Now I generally prefer the hammock, especially up in this part of the woods. It's a lot cooler when it's hot, and you can basically nearly always find a couple of trees good enough to swing that thing off. In a pinch you can actually put it on the ground, but there are a few places that look pretty open, maybe not great for a hammock, including the first camp at the caravan park before I launch. So again, with the luxury of having plenty of room and weight, the tent's very small and light. That's me another, I think with the full setup, kilo and a half. No harm in taking it in this case. It's a different mindset you might have on other sorts of outdoor adventures, camping trips, but I'd much rather just have the security of both options. Camping gear. Usual bits and pieces. They're in there for now. They won't be all the way, but I always take now earplugs and a mask. That can make a real difference. Mostly there won't be people around, but sometimes it can be quite windy or waves or the like, and if there's people around, they want to stay up really late at night and party, as often happens, and that's completely fine. You're not going to get distracted by their talking and carrying on so much, or walking past your tent or hammock with their headlamps on, so virtually nothing to carry, but a little pair of sleeping earplugs and an eye mask is invaluable. The sleep and the recovery is so important on these trips. A little bit of safety gear, but also comfort. This is actually a vapor barrier lining for my sleeping bag. So it's actually completely waterproof, which is kind of weird. It's like sleeping in a sauna to some degree, but really good one if it's really cold, which it won't be, and my bag's plenty warm. It adds quite a lot of warmth to your setup. 2, it keeps any moisture on you out of the down of the sleeping bag, so that's potentially more of an issue if I'm turning up, things haven't gone quite to plan, I'm turning up at night, I'm a bit wet and buggered and I just want to get to bed. This means I can just do whatever, and worst case in an emergency, it's actually a space blanket as well. So again, it's an item that's maybe not essential, but it's a good little backup. Weighs nothing, isn't much size, so got to bring it. Well, this is my rodent-proof sack made of stainless steel mesh. Of course, you can have food and you open it and rubbish, there's always a bit of a smell. Rats and mice, possums like to get into that stuff. Now some people just stow that in their kayak. Unfortunately, the little buggers sometimes smell it and chew through the hatches and the like. So all my scraps, I shouldn't say scraps, but all my leftover food wrappers and bits and pieces, opened food that isn't finished, that lives in this bag, just gets wrapped around a tree with a little wire overnight, so anything can try to get into it, but they can't. I've actually spent many nights in the bush listening, going to sleep with little creatures dragging this thing around the tree trying to get in, but they never do, so works well. Navigation, backup after backup after backup. So of course, deck compass, hand compass, 2 GPS units, separate. They're quite simple, but one I'll use, one as a backup if I really need it. That's overkill. I happen to have a second older one, so I'll take it. My watch is a GPS, my phone can navigate as a GPS, so yeah, there's some pretty strong currents out there and I won't be able to see land at some points whatsoever, so navigating purely by compass and maps can be done. People are better at it, can do a lot better than I can, but with the GPS I feel much more secure, adjusting my drift lines and the like and ensuring I hit those little islands. In terms of comfort, things that people may, this was a breakthrough for me, which nearly everyone knew about for a long time, take a little pack of wet wipes, because all that dried up salt and grit that's all over you, can't always get it off or go for a swim. You might arrive late at night and it's cold, so comfort thing just to wipe yourself down. Something that I think a lot of people are onto too for these longer trips, but some rash, salve or cream or goo, this is Gurney goo, made in New Zealand I believe, are just brilliant. Anyone who's paddled a lot, especially in the sea where it's a dry day, you get a lot of salt crystals. You're rotating, you're paddling along, your PFD's doing its thing, and let's just say bloody nipples and armpits from all that abrasion is a real spoiler to the mood of the trip. This stuff goes on, it lasts all day, you just rub it in the morning, and it prevents that completely. Absolutely brilliant. Emergency kits, first aid, of course, all got all that usual stuff. Now I mentioned that water is going to be an issue out there potentially. I'm going to take a lot, say 30 litres plus in the hatch and resupply just before halfway. So I should be right, but we're out a long way, winds can blow up, even if the forecasts are pretty good these days. What I'm actually taking as a backup is 6 of these heavy duty, very large clear poly bags and some ties, and probably the most efficient way to find water if you're not sure, as long as you've got a little bit of vegetation, you slip those over some green leafy branches in the sun, do them up, and the transpiration from the bush and the tree will collect a usable amount of water there. And that's, I really don't expect to use that, I really don't want to use that, but again, for the sake of in a kayak where weight doesn't matter a huge amount, for that little bit of extra, that gives me a lot more comfort that I can at least survive a few days if things get critical. Water's by far most important. You can do with just about anything else. Again, it's all about having options and having margin for error if things don't work out. PFD, of course, everyone's going to have that. Usual bits and pieces on there with safety and personal locator beacon and all that sort of carry on. But this is very cool. I'll try to put a little thing up in the corner. This is a rescue streamer. Basic particularly if you are so unlucky to end up in the ocean, separated from your kayak. Look, I've got a PLB, phone, VHF radio, all that to contact, but there's many stories. Actually, there was one recently with some dives out in Moreton Bay where the aerial search really struggles, even if they've got a PLB location on you, to pick out that little hidden PFD floating around the ocean with white caps and the like. So the sea streamer is basically a big bright orange length of floating plastic. It's quite small, this one. You get a couple of sizes, but this one always sits on my PFD. That you just unroll and it floats behind you in the water, and it creates like a big bright orange stripe that they can see from the air a long way away and just hone in straight away. I'm never going to use this. I certainly hope I'm never going to use this, but I think that's the ultimate caller search. They know roughly where you are, and then with this they can see from a fair distance in the air that you're actually there. What I wanted to show, again, no surprises, the little night light, and this will be on my kayak always, unless I'm doing a very short. There's one day I do a quick little hop for a couple of hours to another island. This goes on the back deck and it's turned on. The battery lasts, I think, like 150 hours, so it'll go the whole trip if it stays on pretty much. But the idea is, if things don't go quite to plan, it's not a big issue and it gets dark. And actually I'm launching in the dark a few times, so I'll definitely need it on there. But even in the evening as well, if I go a bit later, I'm lit up. So the worst happens, don't have to worry about it. Other boats, if they are out there, can see me. They know where I am, worst happens. So that just lives with me for the entire trip. Margin of safety. My hat, I'm not a good filmmaker or YouTuber, so I just clip my little action cam to this little bolt-on fitting in my cap and turn it on from time to time, and hopefully some of that crap is reasonable enough to watch. You know the drill, you've seen my other stuff. And the other one that's in my food that I'm putting together there, if anyone who's paddled with me knows, I'll take No-Doz everywhere. I like my coffee, I like my caffeine. No-Doz are just a little 100mg caffeine tablet that probably everyone's heard of. They live on my PFD, I put them in with my food. I think I stash them everywhere, so I'm not going to run out if I lose some or forget where some are anywhere. But also great for a little boost of energy if you really need it. Take a couple of those extra on the water to what you normally would do for your routine. My footwear, I'll come around here for this one. I've tried everything up here for paddling booties and the like, and it's kind of frustrating because you only really want or need footwear when you're launching and retrieving, when there's rocks and sharp things potentially. So it's a limited use, but it's a real bugger if you don't have it and you've got to land somewhere when there's oysters and the like. So I've tried a lot of different booties, neoprene, even the 1.5 mil you can get. That's not easy. It's a little bit too warm in most conditions, maybe not the time of the year I'm doing this trip. Probably worse than that is that with a full day of paddling, and some of these days are quite long, let's say 10, 12 hours even, your feet just sit wet in this sort of bag almost for all that time. And particularly on the trip I did to Townsville to Cairns, paddling 80k or so a day, by the end of the day your skin is like a steamed wonton. It's soft, it's disgusting, it's falling apart. I wouldn't say blisters, but it's abrading in a way that's not nice. This little slip-on thongy thing here, sandal thong, don't know what they call them exactly, I've taken to using. Maybe not quite as secure in the water, in the surf and the like, but good enough, and lets my feet breathe is the most important thing, and certainly has adequate sole protection to save from cuts. So that's my footwear there. Oh yeah, actually, anyone seen these? These are my torture devices for all this training I've been doing on this program. These are resistance balls. What you do is you strap it around your kayak hull and they go under the water. If you're not feeling the strongest, you might put 1 or 3 under the hull and the rest outside. If you're feeling strong, you put all 5 under the hull. And if you're feeling super strong, you put 2 of them just up at the water's edge where they sort of interact between the surface of the water and the air, and they seem to create a lot of resistance there. The idea is this gives you loaded kayak training. Obviously the kayak's going to have a lot of weight, probably 60, 70 kilos of gear and water and food, maybe even a little bit more. And so you want to get the strength and the feel of pushing along that much heavier boat. If you just train with a light kayak, that can be a bit of a surprise. It's also really, really good, and it's probably more the purpose they have it on the program that I'm on, for fine-tuning your technique. If your paddle stroke is not really strong, really grabbing the water efficiently and holding it through the whole stroke, the resistance from these balls will show up as almost feeling like soft spots through your stroke. So great bit of kit. I just saw that there, but with all this training and doing, this goes on at least once per week. Otherwise I troll a lure sometimes. Look, then there is the whole fitness and training thing, which is something sea kayakers frankly often don't take seriously enough. Look, even as a recreational activity, which is all we're undertaking here, even if it's a little bit longer than some, better fitness and technique makes everything better. Your days on the water are going to be easier, you can go further, you can explore more, and really that means you can enjoy the trip a lot more. On top of that, having a bit of extra endurance and speed in reserve is actually a major safety factor. It's that margin for error again, that you have some capacity to deal with the unexpected. If you may be able to pull off a trip fairly easily in the right, or easily enough in the right conditions, but having that reserve can make all the difference. So while the early mornings aren't always fun, I think they're worth it. For my Townsville to Cairns paddle, which was 4 days, 3 nights, 320 kilometres, I used the Paddle to Fitness program, and I've been back on that again in the lead up to this trip. Now, it's designed for sprint kayak and ocean ski racing. Very, very different to what I do. Some would say, what the hell? There's no resemblance, but I actually feel it translates very well even for us that are lumbering sea kayakers. They take what is roughly the 80-20 approach, which is what most modern training does these days. The 80% being lots of low intensity work. That trains a certain type of cardio, a certain type of metabolic endurance, and it's also very good for the technique and the neuromuscular patterning that we're looking to develop to reinforce that technique into our system so it becomes natural. And then the 20% is, or roughly thereabout, is that sort of sprint and max effort work where you're trying to build different energy systems, and you do need those in sea kayaking from time to time, I can assure you. You want to have the high end as well as the low end. And it also trains technique under pressure, which is again important. You might not be braking because you're running at 100% of your speed potential, but very easy you could be breaking down after 80-100 kilometres on the ocean when you're tired, hungry and it's getting dark. So that sort of training that comes from this somewhat more traditional racing focused program, I think is still very important. The program also incorporates resistance paddling. I showed the resistance balls earlier, and I think that sort of training is invaluable for expedition kayaking. You will have a heavy loaded boat. That can be a very unfamiliar challenge to paddle if you're not used to a bit of extra weight and resistance. So, the fitness side is a grind, but it's worth it. What I really enjoy as well in the program is the in-depth technique coaching. It might seem strange, I use a Greenland paddle. Looks very different at first glance to the wing or propeller paddles that skis and K1s use, but ultimately the optimal biomechanics for a human body to propel a kayak doesn't change much, regardless of the type of kayak or paddle you're using. So much applies there, and then on top of that, the physics of the Greenland paddle actually means it works very similarly to a wing or propeller paddle that the racing guys use. There are definitely some subtle differences, which it's my challenge to get across, but they are subtle. The overall pattern and effect and the way that it drives water is very similar, so it applies quite well. Ultimately, technique for the forward stroke and kayaking is amazingly complex if you want to go down the rabbit hole. You never feel like you've fully cracked it. There's always something to work on every session. Then beyond the program, certainly training incorporates working on rough water and in dirty conditions, with the conditions, against the conditions, side onto the conditions. That's something you develop over time, but you want to be fresh and comfortable with the potential challenges that can happen out there from time to time. I also incorporate plenty of night paddling. It's a different element again, really changes the feel of the water and how you respond, but there'll definitely be night paddling involved in this trip, so I want to stay current with that. Self-rescues, very important not to neglect, something that sea kayakers maybe do a little bit better than the fitness and forward stroke and technique. Traditionally, I have a pretty solid set of rolls, which I practice every week or two to keep fresh, so I'm fairly comfortable with that, but beside relying on my rolls, I do still practice the alternatives, the re-enters and rolls, the cowboy scrambles and so forth as a backup, just in case. It's all the same principle as fitness. It's a margin for error. Much better to have practiced and be fairly secure in your own mind that you have options and that the situation isn't a huge challenge. The more comfortable and better practiced you are, the more safe you feel. The more safe you feel means that you can stop and actually enjoy the trip and everything it has to offer, rather than just being in survival mode. And look, whilst you're out there to be challenged, or I'm out there to be challenged to some degree, ultimately this is a holiday. I'm out there to have fun. So hopefully all this work, all this 3-4 days a week fitness paddling, as well as rough water paddling, as well as rescues and the like, all mean that I get the most value from this few weeks touring through the islands.